Okay, we'll try to connect Dirk again, but it's 8 a.m. and it's time to get started. Please make sure you mute your audio and turn off your video if you're not one of our speakers. Use the chat box on the WebEx to submit your questions, and we will also be adding helpful information there. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll have it up on our I4C website. And if you're sharing on social media, please use the hashtag #InnovateForClimate. So welcome to the role of international carbon markets for driving innovation to decarbonize Latin American economies. This is an I4C session in partnership with 4E, GIZ, and the Ministry of Energy of Chile. And with that, I'll give the floor to Mariela Ramos, who will welcome you.
Thank you, Isabel. Good morning, good afternoon. I am Mariela Ramos, Technical Advisor at the GIZ Global Carbon Market Project. On behalf of GIZ, the Ministry of Energy of Chile, and the Innovate for Climate initiative, sponsored by the World Bank, we are very much welcome you all to this virtual event titled The Role of International Carbon Markets for Driving Innovation to Decarbonize LATAM Economies. We are very pleased to see that a good number of attendees are joining us today to participate in this interesting international discussion fostered by panelists from Uruguay, Mexico, and I would like to thank you once again for being here today. And let me now hand it over to our distinguished moderator, Mr. Dirk Forrester, President and CEO of the International Emissions Trading Association, IETA. Thank you. Dirk, you are now in charge.
Great, thank you, Maria. It's great to be with you all. And in the spirit of just-in-time preparedness, right as the webinar was about to begin, my power went out here in the United States, but I guess that can happen anywhere. So I'm doing this by the best smartphone. So hopefully this all works. It is really a delight to be together to talk about the role of international markets in delivering ambition. Obviously, this is a very strange year that's given a lot of us time to reflect and to plan for more important things to come in the future as we deal with the pandemic, but also as we think about how the Article 6 section of the Paris Agreement might enable countries to work together to do even more, a consideration that many of them will undertake as they begin to develop new NDCs. So I'm delighted that I get to be a part of this today to give you some overview, because in the business community, I think there's a strong recognition that we cannot get to net zero without cooperation. Obviously, it takes finance, it takes technology, but bringing it all together on a policy foundation that supports cooperation across borders is going to be essential. And otherwise, we are not really serious about tackling climate change, because you really have our businesses to grow and prosper, but also to increasingly face better and better incentives to reduce emissions. I want to pass the floor to my good friend Juan Pedro Cel, who's the chief of the Climate Change Unit in the Ministry of Chile, to give some opening remarks on his side. So Juan Pedro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dirk. It's can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming through loud and clear. Sounds good.
Super. So thank you very much for accepting being our moderator. We're very honored to have you. I'll be very brief, and I'll try to add to your scene setting in terms of carbon pricing and why carbon pricing and why in the region. So first, you have said it in many times, many people, international cooperation is key to succeed in our pathway to net zero. If we want to achieve the goals of the Paris Agreement in terms of, trying to contain the increase in temperature no more than 1.5 Celsius by mid-century, we will have to impose a deep decarbonization, especially by 2030, 40%, and to increase it and to to reach zero around mid-century. We also need to be aware that not every jurisdiction will progress at the scale and pace needed. So, but at the same time, we need to ensure that the burden of efforts is shared among all of us. I mean, all the countries, companies. And this is where precisely carbon pricing fits in the equation. We cannot charge every responsibility to carbon pricing, but it certainly has an important role, and we need to factor in the equation, adding up to climate policies, mitigation and adaptation, and also other low carbon policies, and with the aim of reaching net zero even before 2050. So why carbon pricing? Because emissions can be reduced in the most cost-effective manner. I took this from your presentation in a previous seminar. This is an ongoing analysis, very interesting, done by IETA, sponsored by IETA, I would say, with universities and other stakeholders. And you can see here how Dirk, you always say in an ideal world where Article 6, operates very nicely and neatly. So if you look at the chart, we can reduce the costs very significantly if we get rid of fossil fuels with Article 6, then you will get a reduction around 165 billion tons a year. Billions a year. And if we use land use, we can increase that reduction in cost by around 200 millions a year. And we can also increase our ambition by around 4 gigatons of CO2 a year, and we can double that by including land use change in the equation. So this is more or less how, if we cooperate. So the study was very illustrative in the sense that, or is, because it is ongoing, in the sense that if we do it alone, we can probably reach these levels of emission reduction, but not by 2050 for sure, and not at the cost that the study is telling us if we work all together. So why carbon pricing? Again, well, a well-designed instrument complementary to other low carbon policies can drive emissions and tonnages costs down effectively by providing the right price signals to the private sector, and at the same time preventing undesired effects such as carbon leakage, loss of competitiveness, distributional impacts, and so on. So in this manner, the cost of carbon can be properly internalized, and companies can share those costs more equally. Of course, we see in carbon pricing an opportunity to promote public policies and, more importantly, technology innovation. So in that manner, carbon pricing can increase revenues in an efficient manner. So this is very important, Dirk, recycling these revenues towards more robust and deep climate policies. So a conclusion for this is that carbon pricing should be implemented at all levels, national, international, and also internally in companies, in order to accelerate efficient transitions toward low carbon economies. But how? This is a chart that everyone already knows. This is from the State and Trends of Carbon Pricing in 2020. So what is important here, how the distribution of the different instruments, carbon pricing instruments, ETS and carbon taxes around the world. So to the right of the chart, you will see the coverage of each of the instruments. It ranges from less than 4% to 85%. From the left to the top of the chart, you can see the different carbon pricing, ranging from less than $1 to almost $120. The size of the circles tells you the proportionality in terms of the revenues of each of the instruments. In blue, the tax, and in green, the EU ETS. What is interesting from this is that all together, these instruments are covering around 22% of total GHG emissions. And that now 46 national and 32 subnational jurisdictions have a price on carbon. And in the region, you already know that Mexico, Chile, Colombia, and Argentina have an operational carbon tax. But this is interesting that Mexico and Colombia are transitioning to an ETS. Mexico has a pilot ETS. You will hear from the colleague of Mexico and also from Colombia. And Colombia is designing the ETS figures that they committed and they adopted in their climate change law. And you can see at the bottom of the chart, Argentina, Chile, and Colombia, they have similar carbon prices, but different coverage of the three carbon taxes. So this is how it looks in terms of geographical distribution of different carbon pricing instruments. You should also know that not all of them are in full operation. Some of them are implemented, under implementation, or even considering one of these two main instruments. So with this, I'll finalize. In terms of challenges that could be seen also as opportunities, we need to understand the role of carbon pricing in a net zero world. Even if we get negative, I think that carbon pricing has a role also there. This is a challenge. Around 80% of total GHG emissions are not covered by a price on carbon. We also need to get the right price, if there's a right price. If you go to the literature, we need to be above $50 a ton to really be, internalizing the cost of carbon pricing. So almost 75 of the emissions covered by carbon pricing instruments are below $10 the ton of CO2. We also have the challenge of trying to converge climate goals and also the different carbon pricing instruments around the globe, meaning that the more we can try to link these initiatives, the more cost effective will be. We'll operate these instruments in a more cooperative way. A big challenge now that apparently is staying with us for hopefully not for the long run, the COVID-19. So we also need to understand how carbon pricing will also help us in recovering more quickly, especially in the region. And we need to speed up progress in the region. We have some alternative grouping of countries that could, benefit from trying to, to get more closer in terms of carbon pricing, like the Pacific Alliance and the carbon pricing in the Americas. So with this, Dirk, now I give the floor to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm changing. No?
We can hear you now, yes.
We're really fortunate to have that basis of common understanding now from that scene-setting presentation. Thank you, Juan Pedro. And it really is interesting to see the gradual progress, but also to have a sense of the objective that all of us have in mind of taking carbon pricing forward in a way that can actually meet the Paris objectives. We have three perspectives now from different countries to give us a little more of a deep dive into national approaches on this. And I'm delighted to begin with Ms. Carolina Urmeneta, who is the head of the Climate Change Unit in the Environment Ministry in Chile. Carolina, against that backdrop, would love to get your views on how Chile has advanced toward carbon markets. And in particular, we know that you've had green tax reform underway in a climate change framework there in Chile. And we're wondering how Chile is sort of weaving together the green tax and aspirations for moving towards markets, and in particular with a view toward Article 6 playing an important role in the context of a carbon neutrality goal in the future. So with that, I hope that's come across clearly. I'd love to pass the floor to Carolina. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, and thank you everyone to organize this webinar and for all the people that is attending. And you make me a really huge question. I think I'm going to go by the first one that is related about how Chile has progressed towards the carbon markets in order to advance the next information. And I want to tell you that since the origins of the carbon price instruments in Kyoto, Chile has had an active participation in markets, being the second at regional level below Brazil, of course, with more than 100 projects registered in the CDM and also a lot of projects registered in the voluntary market also. Being the Ministry of Environment of Chile, the organism with the responsibility of delivering the letter of approval as the determined national authority. In January 2020, as you were saying, we presented the Climate Change Framework Law to the Congress with a status of extreme urgency, helping to move faster in the parliamentary process. The project address carbon neutrality by 2050, and we will be the first country in the region to have it by law. We hope to have that by law if the Congress agree with this. And that is a central commitment. And also it recognized the NDC as an intermediate goal and by 2030. And it also includes GHG emission standards and a GHG emission compensation system. But that is a project now. We don't have it, and it's not really a reality by now. We have our NDC that was updated and presented in April 2020 to the UNFCCC with a mitigation goal focused on an emission carbon budget by the period for 2020 to 2030, an absolute goal by 2030, and a peak of emission by 2025. This is an intermediate goal and on a way to carbon neutrality, which is a big opportunity to Chile because we have a lot of exercise that says that, and according to the World Bank study that was published in October 2020, we have that our route of carbon neutrality can result in an increase of 4.4% of our GDP by 2050, which is a huge opportunity, but it is also a big challenge because we need to invest in green projects, and therefore we need instruments as carbon market and others to go for that project. And that is why in February 2020, we are happy to say that we have a modification of our tax reform, and that is already a law, and it is published, and that law modernize our tax legislation by incorporating a CO2 compensation instrument like offsets that must operate from 2023. And that is a huge instrument that we will have right now in 2 years in Chile to operate something regarding offset and compensation. And I think we are going to talk about more in detail later. I think you are mute. You are mute.
Thank you very much, Carolina. It's really great to get that overview, and we will come back for a few more questions on that, and in particular, roles of international cooperation. As we're moving through here, I also want to make sure that those of you in the audience feel free to send in questions through the chat function over on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll watch for those, and I'll organize those into questions for the panelists later in the session. I'm going to turn next to Dr. Marco Heredia from Mexico. He is the General Coordinator for Climate for Policies for Climate Change at the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources in Mexico. Marco, interesting things happening in Mexico in the sphere of carbon trading with a pilot program that started up and a vision toward moving to an ETS in the future, built on an initial tax proposal that's been in operations for a while. So I'm really curious to find out how you think the pilot is going and how do you foresee future evolution of the domestic market or possible international linkages going forward? So that, Marco, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Dirk. This is a really important time for us to disseminate what's going on in Mexico. As you mentioned, it's interesting. There's interesting things going on right now, and some of them are very much related to the implementation of the pilot phase of the ETS. As you mentioned, we're starting with it, and I'd like to share with you and with the audience what's going on at this point in time. You've also mentioned that we have a carbon tax already in place, and that has been going on for quite a while, 6, 7 years, 8 years, I believe. But at this point in time, what we're doing is we're starting after the adoption of the Paris Agreement and the approval of the Senate. We had an amendment to the General Law on Climate Change, providing for the implementation of a system for carbon emissions trading. So with that, we started with the definition of the rules of a pilot phase for an ETS, and that was issued last year in October. And this year has been practically the verification of those units that are above 100,000 tons of carbon emissions per year. And the verification of these installations, of these facilities, gives them the opportunity to have an account, to have a register, to have an account, and with that, they are ready to participate in the emissions trading system. At this point in time, in 2020, that's what has happened. All those facilities that are above 100K tons of emissions are able to participate if they verify their emissions. Once they verify the emissions, once they are ready to request for an account, we give them an account, and we are ready to start with this pilot, non-cost, kind of a mock exercise of the emissions trading for 2021. In 2022, we will have to review our guidelines for the participation of the ETS, and that is expected to be fully implemented in operational, so to speak, in a real scenario in 2023. So that's what we are right now in terms of the adoption of the full ETS. We are at this point in time, ensuring that all the players are on board, ensuring that everybody that is over 100K tons per year of carbon emissions are on board and what we're trying to do right now is to have all the players above it. This is very important because one of the things, and this might be a lesson learned from this pilot phase, is that you have to work very closely with industry, with chambers, with associations. At this point in time, we're only considering the energy and the industry sectors. So we have to work very close together with their associations, with the chambers. Of course, the major producers of energy, that's the Federal Commission of Electricity, where we're very we're very closely working with them so that they understand, they are fully prepared. This is also something very important. Sometimes industry is not prepared, does not understand well how this is how this should work. They have to implement internal arrangements for them to provide the necessary credentials and authorizations for the implementation of the transactions. So this is something you have to have very clear in mind. How to, internally and externally, you are gonna be functioning in the ETS, and this is something we're right now very devoted to working with industry, with the representatives, with the chambers, so that we, move along with them. We accompany them. They accompany us in the way that they share their own challenges internally, and we also, have a direct and permanent communication with them. We also created a council that comprises the major players. We also include them, the Institute of Ecology and Climate Change. We have this body that provides recommendations, that provides insights about both sides. I mean, industry, private sector, public sector, how we're working with this. And this is also very useful because we can hear their views, we can hear their challenges, and we can also express ours there. So this is what's going on right now, almost real life, life in a live feed at this point in time in Mexico. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. And I think you really emphasized an important piece of it there at the end of how, in a market context, companies at it quite differently, and they need to have their own internal systems of control for how they're going to engage in the market to make sure they can comply, but also to make sure that they maximize the financial prospects for their company in doing so. And it's very good that you have that council established. So we'll also have some more time for discussion with Marco coming up in a few moments, but I want to turn now to Ms. Cecilia Penegueño from Uruguay. She leads the work in Uruguay in carbon pricing at the Environment Ministry of Uruguay and the Climate Change Directorate. And I'm curious about how Uruguay is now positioning itself on carbon pricing, how it's thinking about markets of the future and potential engagement with other countries in the region or elsewhere in terms of market linkages. So, Cecilia, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dirk. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's like we are a new player here in these discussions. So I'm really glad and grateful to be here sharing this panel with Carolina, Marco, and you, Dirk. I'm bringing the perspectives from my country, which is not as advanced on this issue as Chile and Mexico are, but recognizing the importance of being actively involved in these discussions from now on. Just to share with you some important facts that are taking place in Uruguay at this point in time that make us think that it is a truly opportune momentum to move forward and deepen in all these aspects related to carbon markets, carbon pricing, and so on. What are these facts that are happening in Uruguay right now is about 3 months ago, the Ministry of Environment was created by law, which implies the prioritization of environmental issues at the national scale, with climate change being one of the aspects that will be prioritized in our country. Uruguay is currently in the process of developing its long-term strategy, in which we expect to include an aspirational scenario of CO2 neutrality by 2050 an announcement made by our former minister at the UN Climate Summit in 2019. And the process will be built based on the existing national climate change policy in Uruguay, developed through a participatory process during 2016 and approved by the executive power in 2017. Additionally, in 2022, Uruguay will submit its second nationally determined contribution to the UNFCCC, being the first submitted in 2017 and including ambitious objectives related to emission intensity reduction per unit of GDP and also per kilogram of beef produced, because Uruguay is a beef producer, a food producer, mainly beef, and a beef exporter, so we need to take this food sector into account in all our commitments, as well as to the conservation of carbon stocks in the LULUCF sectors, biomass in forest, soil organic carbon in natural grasslands, croplands, and also peatlands. We are also finalizing the early phases of our RED program in Uruguay and seeking financing for implementing RED activities in the next future. So we can expect emission reductions and increases in carbon stocks in the coming years, which makes that carbon markets are really interesting for us nowadays. As a food producing country, mainly beef, as I mentioned, Uruguay is developing right now a low carbon strategy for livestock production in coordination with the Ministry of Agriculture, which will include the development of a nationally appropriate mitigation action for its implementation in the future term. And also, given the energy transformation experienced in Uruguay in the last decade, most of the electricity generated in Uruguay comes from renewable sources, and being transport the main contributor to CO2 emissions in our country. A national sustainable urban mobility policy is also under development through a participative process. All these things that are happening in our country nowadays makes us think that we have to move forward and be more actively involved in the discussions related to Article 6 and to carbon markets and carbon pricing and so on. What we said in relation to markets until now, we included a general paragraphs in relation to carbon markets and the use of Article 6 in our first NDC. But we recognize that we need to move forward and improve our technical capacities on these issues. How to do that? As Marco and Carolina said, we have to involve key actors at all levels within our country, at the political level at first, but also private sector, academia, NGOs, other actors of the civil society, in order to improve their understanding and knowledge of these issues. What else? Learning from the experiences of other countries. Chile and Mexico are very good examples of this. And also finding the best partners who can advise us in terms of options, including the best use of Article 6 of Paris Agreement, benefits, constraints, opportunities, and challenges of carbon markets, carbon pricing, and so on. And eventually finding the best way to move forward, taking into account the particular circumstances of Uruguay. We know that we need to be technically well prepared, better prepared than we are today, in order to take advantage of all the progress made to date around carbon markets, and at the end to influence the decision-making process at the highest level as possible in our country and where possible at the regional and international context. And that is why we wanted to be more actively involved in this kind of discussions with all of you from now on. That's are my initial remarks, Dirk, on your questions.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. And I'm really glad that you drew out, you know, the interesting role that nature-based solutions might play, whether it's in agriculture and working with your farmers, or for forest assets, and how those can be turned into a positive form of engagement on climate change. Certainly, it's something I know a lot of businesses are interested in. The pathway to net zero is this increasing role for and nature would certainly be part of that. I'm interested, I want to come back for a second round of questions to each of you, and I think that's a theme that's probably common to all three countries, that you have very powerful interests in agriculture and forestry, and I know from visiting my visit to we had the Latin American and Caribbean Carbon Forum in Montevideo a few years ago. We've had it in Chile recently and in Mexico. So I'm curious about how you see the goals and challenges of the carbon market across your economies, and maybe in particular how this role of integrating nature-based solutions into the program, how you're envisioning that, because it does spread the engagement across many more sectors when that's done. Who would like to start on that question? Maybe I'll turn to Cecilia first and just give us a sense of sort of the goals and challenge you have for your market, but touch on this topic of engagement for sort of the farms and forests across Chile.
Yes, 75% of our emissions come from the agriculture sector in Uruguay, and also 100% of our sequestration comes from the forestry sector, but also we wanted to take into account soil organic carbon in relation to some management practices that farmers can apply in their farms that can lead them to potentially increase their carbon sequestration in soils. And that is one of the main challenges that we are thinking. We have included already objectives in terms of reduction of emissions intensity, and also carbon sequestration in biomass and in soil organic carbon in croplands and grasslands, natural grasslands in Uruguay. So we have to move forward in this same pathway. And in our long-term strategy, those are going to be interesting pathways also to consider and to include in our way to the CO2 neutrality by 2050. So farmers are key players in Uruguay, and we need to make them engaged and involved. And it's like in Uruguay, it is called co-innovation. I don't know if this word exists in other countries. That is like we have to create with them the best mechanisms and ways to increase our ambition as a country. Those are my
interesting. Thank you, Cecilia. Marco, maybe I'll come back to you then on a Mexico view of the same topic, sort of the goals and aspirations, and if you wouldn't mind touching on how you see this, the role of nature-based solutions in farms and forests in Mexico.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I believe it's very important as also in terms of substantive climate action. A big part of our NDC, I'm already giving you some insights about the process of the NDC. It's going to be based on the nature-based solutions, just because we have a very important forest corpus, and that's going to be also something that will help us obtain benefits, climate benefits in both mitigation and adaptation. We're very much looking forward towards implementing climate natural-based solutions we're also looking at a number of non-conventional sources or non-conventional repositories for carbon, such as blue carbon, for example. Also forestry, you know, agriculture, more climate smart practices. This is a key topic, and we are implementing it in both in sectorial work, but we're also working at a cross-cutting or implementing a cross-cutting approach to that. Pertaining to the ETS, we are working very hard right now. Actually, this week we have some discussions with experts in terms of how to advance protocols for compensations for trade-offs in the carbon market. So it's not only that nature-based solutions is going to be, you know, addressed as a synergy between mitigation and adaptation in our NDC, but it's also going to be part of how can we best take advantage of the trade-offs of the you know, agricultural land use, you know, a combination of areas there that forestry, of course, that can give us benefits for mitigations and for mitigation and for implementing those projects, those practices, programs also in the ETS as a trade-off mechanism for those companies that are willing and able to invest in projects considering nature-based solutions, you know, reforestation, carbon sequestration, capture, absorptions in the different arrays of opportunities that we have either in blue carbon projects, in climate, in agricultural, livestock management practices, land use and land use conservation, so on and so forth. So that's a huge opportunity for us to look at, and we're already starting to, you know, to touch base with experts either in the academia, in the consulting services, in the private and public sector activities, you know, asking them, considering a number of issues around this and how we can best implement those elements, that quantification, that possibility for reduction of emissions, for absorptions into a complex system as the ETS. So that's what we're doing right now, and that's a huge part of our work. And that's going to be also a huge part of our new and renewed, our updated NDC.
We will look forward to seeing that official version of it. But this is really helpful. Thank you for that view, Carolina. Let's. I want to turn to you on the Chile example now. I know this is an area that you guys have explored quite extensively, but I'm also interested in how you view goals and challenges more broadly. But certainly of nature.
Yes, thank you. And it is really similar that we were talking. And what is important, I think, is that we already have an updated NDC, and there we put nature-based solution as a center of our carbon neutrality that considers the forest capture and of CO2, of course, and also the agriculture mitigation that are two big components of our NDC. Also considering renewable energy efficiency, hydrogen, for example, and another type of projects. And I want to highlight also what was Marco and Cecilia saying regarding the close work with the private sector, the consultants and brokers. We did in October and November, just finished last week, our work with the support of this, and we did an expert roundtable in order to talk about their experience in carbon markets and what we should consider for the compensation system in Chile, and what are the lessons learned and the talents that we have. And in that roundtable, we heard a lot about nature-based solutions. And I think that is also related with what we are talking about. We need solutions for nature-based solutions that help us in order to consider this kind of solutions in carbon markets. And that is why we are working, for example, in baseline, considering forest, in order to help the developers of the projects to go for carbon markets and to have that that help in order to implement that projects.
Thank you. I've gotten a couple of questions in the chat, and so I do want to involve the audience as best we can. One of the questions, and this one I think is probably for all three of you, relates to sort of whether you have forecasts on how carbon prices might evolve for 2030 or 2050, and most of the industries that you would need for complying with the carbon limits. And so if you have your own government projections on pricing on this. Now, Juan Pedro gave us some sort of macro numbers from economic models that AIDA has been involved with that were, again, that was more of a global look. And I think this is a question about a national view. Is that something that you have thoughts on that you'd like to share? Who would like to go first? Raise a hand. Don't jump at once.
Well,
Marco.
I could go. Oh, okay.
Please, Carolina. Oh, Carolina, you go. That's great.
That is just for help. It is a little tricky. We have a task that is $5 per ton, and of course, it is a low price, but considering what is going on the countries and the experience of another countries, for example, in France, we have the yellow jackets and everything. It is not easy just to go to increase the tax. And that is why we include this compensation system, because with the tax, we don't want to get money for the state. We want to reduce GHG emissions. And when we have a task and we put that money for climate action, I think it's a good solution in order to advance. Maybe it is not the best, but it helps. And I hope after we keep this situation, difficult situation for all the countries, because all of us are facing a really difficult situation and the economic is bad. Maybe we could talk again about increase that task level.
Right. Good point, Marco.
Yeah, I agree. It's a rather complicated to state at this point in time what would be an appropriate price for carbon. I also believe it has to do with the national establishment of a baseline. Some of my colleagues was discussing this earlier. It is not this. I mean, it does have to do with the baseline in terms of what kind of forest, what kind of surface, what kind of resources you are protecting. In the case of compensation, for example, or trade-off mechanisms. What's the value of that? It's very important to consider what kind of forest land you're protecting. It's not the same, a pristine kind of surface that, or some grasslands that are covering or providing some ecosystemical services. So it's rather complicated at this point in time, but I think more work needs to be done in terms of characterizing the kind of pricing you're going to give to those resources that you're going to be protecting, somehow conserving, and how that's going to be, streamlined into the overall emissions trading system is also something that needs to be carefully reviewed. The tropical forest would, have a number of services that have to be taken into account for that matter. And as I was mentioning, there needs to be more research in that, and there needs to be more understanding of the ecological systems that's around, giving a price to those in the case of, particularly in the case of compensation trade-off projects. That's going to be very, very important in the near future. And we are already starting some discussions about that because it's not, you would have to have some fairness, justice in the terms of, how your climate justice, so to speak, in terms of how you're considering or characterizing the protection of or the conservation of a particular area, and how that's going to be, the owners of that. That's another part of the equation, and how they are going to get or access to those benefits, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
It's I think you're touching on a topic that I know a lot of participants in voluntary carbon markets have been exploring, is that a lot of those natural climate solutions have these other attributes that may also have a value. So some companies are willing to pay more for a project that's got agriculture benefits, or, improved food, or improved water alongside it, because they're trying to track their performance on other SDGs. So it is a kind of an interesting field, and I think it's one that we're all going to learn a lot more about in the coming decade. I don't want to leave Cecilia out. Cecilia, did you have a view on, or has Uruguay had a consideration of what future pricing pathways might evolve, or is this still early stages? And I think maybe as you answer that, there was another question for you about whether the change in government in Uruguay has affected climate policy in the country.
Well, yes, it's too early for us to answer that question, but I totally agree with Carolina and with Marco in relation to the importance of valuing the nature-based solutions and the ecosystem services, and the difficulties that we have on doing that. There are how many years have we discussing this, and we still did not arrive to the best solution to that. So I think we have to still put our efforts on that for sure. In Uruguay, this will be key. So we need to think deeper on that for sure. And in terms of the change on the government, yes, last year we had presidential elections in Uruguay, and the party changed. But the directions that we received till now is that we are going to continue in the same line that we were working on. So I think the creation of the Ministry of Environment is like an important signal for us to make sure that we have a political commitment on the work that we are doing, and also on the commitments made by the prior or the former government. So I think everything is going on, and that we are going to move forward and prioritizing more these kind of aspects in Uruguay.
Thank you. Thank you. Maria Carolina, I know we're about to lose you. Would you have any final words as we're starting to wind up?
No, just thank you to you and the great panelists that we have, and the great questions also that maybe I am not able to hear all of them, but just to say that Chile recognized the use of Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, and this can become a mechanism that can allow countries to implement mitigation actions in a cost-effective way, as well as advance the implementation of new technologies. This is really important for Chile, considering new technologies and, of course, nature-based solution. So thank you very much. And yes, I have to go because I have another commitment. This is a crazy world with webinars. I think you all have that experience. But thank you, and just say goodbye.
Thank you. I think you're right. We're all living these same kind of challenges. So we wish you well for the rest of your day. As we're in our last 4 or 5 minutes here, I want to give Marco, give you a chance also for a parting comment, and maybe as part of this, if you wouldn't mind, give us a little bit of a thought about the vision of what the region might consider for carbon markets, in terms of cooperation and developing or exploiting some of the synergies that are quite apparent from this discussion across the different jurisdictions.
Yeah,
Marco?
well, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate today. I guess this has been a great discussion. I believe that as we move along in our own pilot project, what's important to consider is that it's key to have a number of options. It's key to have a portfolio of opportunities and look at them in the same manner, because there's a lot of work to be done in terms of trade-offs, in terms of opportunities, in terms of technology development, in terms of competitiveness. I believe this opportunity is giving us a chance to look at how we can expand of our opportunities in terms of who can participate, what needs to be done in order for a sound participation of all actors in the arena of emissions trading, and how can we best support them at the same time how can we best facilitate an economic benefit in terms of improving their technology, improving their efficiency in terms of industry and in terms of energy services or generation, and how we can best interact and make synergies with other sectors. We've been discussing that for quite a while in terms of the nature-based solutions. I believe this is key, and I believe this is something where Latin American countries can really take advantage of our position, of our circumstances. And we can also, as you mentioned a while ago, we can also contribute to other SDGs, to poverty alleviation, to hunger, to conservation of ecosystems. I mean, there's a wide array of opportunities out there that we can promote, that we can support with the implementation of an ETS. And I guess this is where we stand at. This is a crossroads for us in terms of what and where we can, foster the development of our industry, other, spreading out benefits or co-benefits with communities, with persons, with ecosystems. And this is a lot of work. I mean, this is a lot of work, and you have to be open to opportunities. And this is really great in terms of how we can best support our industry, how we can best support our economies with a mitigation mechanism. So the ETS is really something that comes at a time where we have to look at a comprehensive. We have to have a comprehensive view to address this, and not just a narrow, industry-based kind of mechanism, because it is not. It's something wider, and you have to understand the big picture in order to, to drive those elements that make your ETS work, and to be compatible with other ETS around the world. So I guess this is a great opportunity, and thank you very much for sharing this with you today.
Great, thank you. And as a really terrific summary, appreciate that, Marco. And I want to give Cecilia an opportunity for a final comment. Cecilia?
Thank you, Dirk. Yes, there are a lot of opportunities around for us. And we also think that nature-based solutions for Latin American countries, which are highly vulnerable to climate change, regarding synergies between mitigation and adaptation are key. It is broad than only industries and yes, the energy sector. I agree totally with Marco on that. I think we just need to decide the role that carbon markets will play in Uruguay. Chile and Mexico, it seems that have already decided that. Uruguay is in the process of analyzing these different options and opportunities and everything, and to decide the best way to move forward on that. That is why we are here today, as I mentioned before, and we expect to keep involved in these kind of discussions from now on with all of you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I think with this package of closing comments, Cecilia, from you and Marco and Carolina, we have a kind of in some ways it sums up what Innovate for Climate is all about as an event, and this event series of bringing people together around solutions together and looking for these synergies and ways to work together. So it's been a terrific discussion. I appreciate your help, and I want to turn back to the co-organizers for closing comments now. Isabel, would you like to, or whoever would like to start on behalf of the co-organizers?
Thank you, Dirk. I think we're ready to close. Like we said, the session will be recorded. And thank you for those words on I4C. And we look forward to seeing you next in our webinars. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Isabel. Thank you, Dirk. Thank you to all of our panelists and assistants today.
Excellent.
Take care.
Thanks, Marie.
Thank you.